after 84 years, Uranus is going to be moving into Gemini, and this is incredibly significant because we already have a bunch of slow-moving generational planets moving into new signs after many years of dwelling in the previous signs. Heavy water, heavy earth energy in the past, but now this year, and we're going to be feeling the effects of this over the next few years. We have our slow-moving planets moving into fire and air signs. Energies that move away the old, blow away the old, and burn away the old. This isn't going to be easy. I'm going to be looking at my notes, and that's why you see me looking around the screen. So I'm going to pull up an astrological chart for Uranus moving into Taurus. Uranus moving into Gemini. I am currently filming this during Uranus in Taurus. We're currently in the 29th degree, a critical degree of things wrapping up in one way, but we'll come back to that in just a second, okay? So I'm looking at my notes. Uranus will move into Gemini on July 8th, sidereal time, around 7 p.m. it looks like, and it will retrograde back into Taurus on November 9th, and that's when at least a few people have predicted economic crashes around the country, at least the United States. That's where I'm coming from when I take a look at these astrological planets, okay? Now, Uranus moved into Taurus in 2018, and I want you to think of all the different things associated with economics that have become unstable in those years. We're talking about 2018. That includes the COVID pandemic. That includes all these supply chain disruptions. That includes the tremendous increase of greedflation and shrinkflation. That's included some tremendous shifts of economic power over to the billionaire class, people who already have tremendous amounts of power, a tremendous amount of wealth transfer heading on up to the top and leaving the people behind who need it the most. That's all about Uranus in Taurus. One particular side gaining too much power, too much traction, too much economic power. Okay? So we're going to start to see things, consequences come into play with Uranus and Gemini. The way that power and wealth has been heading up to the top is not sustainable, and we're starting to see the cracks right now, even as Uranus and Gemini is only starting to have its energy be felt. Okay? So Uranus and Gemini, that's on July 8th, and it will retrograde back into Taurus on November 9th, and that's when we have the possibility of more economic disruptions, and severe ones at that, okay? And then it will move back into Gemini on April 6th, where it will stay until August 2032. So we have a good 6 or 7 years with Uranus and Gemini, and that's going to encourage the new communication channels. Specifically, we might have a faster way to communicate with each other apart from text messages, WhatsApp, email, stuff like that, YouTube comments, for instance. We're going to have even more interesting, more quick ways of communication, but also there's the potential for communication lines to be cut, disrupted. I'm going to get into this in just a second with the chart that I'm going to pull up. But there's something to be said for diplomatic relations to be greatly disrupted between countries that want to wage war against each other. This is potentially disruptive for even friendly countries who were friendly to each other. Spirit's indicating to me that the Five Eyes could be greatly disrupted, even disbanded at this time. Or new members could leave, or new members could come in and old members could leave, such as the United States. There's a real risk that the United States could be leaving the Five Eyes partnership in Uranus and Gemini, okay? So let's talk a little bit about why Uranus and Gemini is so historically important, especially for the United States. Uranus and Gemini was present during the American Revolutionary War, there's one, during the American Civil War, and during World War II. And you'll notice that with all of these time periods, that was a time of tremendous upheaval for the United States. And it was also a time for the United States to take a different position on the world stage. And we're about to head into another time period. This isn't just another extremely important time period for the United States. It's also its Uranus return. So it is going to have a bunch of different transits piled up on top of each other. I noticed that we have Uranus in Gemini, we have Pluto in Aquarius, Neptune in Aries, and Saturn in Aries. 4 transits all piled up in 1 year. These are all outer planets that have a tremendous generational impact. We're going to see this on people who are impressionable enough, young enough, that they're going to remember this for the rest of their lives, for better or for worse, okay? The United States has never had all 4 of those transits piled up on each other. You know what? Let's just leave out Saturn and Aries, okay? Let's have Uranus and Gemini, Pluto and Aquarius, and Neptune and Aries. We've never had all 3 of those transits piled up on top of each other ever in American history, which should indicate to you to some degree how incredibly impactful this time period is going to be. I encourage you to keep looking at this video as the years go on into 2027 and kind of see how things have changed. I'm getting from Spirit most likely for worse, because there's a karmic reckoning that the United States is going to have to go through for its treatment of Black folk, for its treatment of Indigenous folk throughout its entire history. Not just that, the United States has been at war or has had boots on the ground someplace for the vast majority of its history. And the karmic balances must be rebalanced. And Uranus being in Gemini and Pluto being in Aquarius, those are going to be the times of black swan events, black and white extremes. And it's going to be difficult for a lot of people. There's the real risk there are going to be a tremendous uptick in suicides through these years, because it's going to be so impactful that a lot of people are not going to want to live through it. And let's be honest, for a lot of people, this series of transits, or the feeling of these transits, is going to be the final straw for them. This is where community is going to be incredibly not just helpful, but vital to people's survival. Watch out for the people that you sense could be drowning. Listen to what people say, and when people say that they are really going through it, or when they indicate, maybe not directly, that they are going through it, listen to them and do what you can to help. Okay? So I do want to get into my particular a solar chart for when Uranus transits into Gemini. It should be up on your screen right now. We have a minor grand trine between the 3 slow-moving planets, which is called, I saw Astrology King called this the talent triangle. This is a time for an ability to come through, especially with these generationally moving plants, slow moving plants, also for nations. This is going to be the time for new alliances to be made. It's a time for people to come through with their talents and possibly change at least their sector of the world. But keep in mind that some of this might be allied against the United States. So let's take a look at this. We have Pluto in Aquarius, we have Saturn in Aries, and we have Uranus in Gemini. A lot of air, a lot of fire energy, but mostly air energy. This is going to be a powerful energy that sweeps away the old, and it's going to be difficult for people who have heavy air and even water energy. Not air, but earth energy in their birth charts, especially for earthy people. This is going to be a time of upheaval where a lot of folks are not going to feel like they can keep up, and they're just going to tend to emotionally shut down. Be cautious of that, okay? Especially if those people are in your life, or if you happen to be in their lives, or if this happens to be you. That's what I should say. So Uranus and Gemini, I noticed, is conjunct with Venus in Gemini, and that talks to me about nations talking to each other, finding new ways of talking to each other. But with that Gemini, there's the possibility that it could have a front of being kind and diplomatic on the one hand, but on the back end, there could be some deals being made for better and for worse. It depends on the nation. It depends on the context. You should probably take a look and see how this minor trine plays out in your personal birth chart to kind of get an idea of what things are going to be looking like for you, okay, at least in your external world. That Pluto in Aquarius working together with Saturn in Aries is going to give a lot of groundedness, or I should say give a lot to, is going to tend to give a lot of groundedness to new technologies that are coming in that have been below the surface with that Pluto, have been below the surface, kind of getting ready to be born, and now they are. But Saturn in Aries is going to say, let's slow down and let's not just speed into everything. And that's something really positive about this grand trine, is that it does slow some things, some progress down, and allows people to think a little bit more carefully before they leap into this. Ideally, this whole grand trine should be focusing on the humanitarian, but we all know how humanity can be. That humanity will even use this grand trine for negative effects. Just because this is a positive transit, a positive aspect pattern, doesn't mean that it can't be used for genuinely awful things, okay? Just keep that in mind. Saturn and Aries is also working together, I see, with Uranus and Gemini. So suddenly a new way of communication. Also, we're going to see more artificial intelligence, more advances in artificial intelligence, but that Saturn Aries is going to tend to slow things down a little bit, and it's going to force people to ask of themselves, how much of this artificial intelligence, how much of this air travel, this new way of traveling by drone, for instance, how much of this do we actually need? Are we being really careful about the rules and regulations and policies around this that, should be in place in order to keep humanity safe? That Venus and Gemini kind of gives me the idea that there will be countries, nations, that will be talking about this extensively, hopefully, okay? That, or they could be using technology in such a way that it benefits the upper billionaire class, the elite, over the regular everyday working class individual, okay? With Pluto in Aquarius, it can be about the collective, it can be about freedom, but it depends on how humanity uses that power. So yeah, and then we've got Uranus and Gemini working well together, Pluto and Aquarius, and this is all about tremendous new ways of dealing with technology. I understand that people are talking about how AI is just kind of stupid right now. It's only as smart as the people feeding language learning material or anything like that. It's only as smart as people teach it to be. But right here, I'm seeing an advance in such a way that AI is going to outstrip the human brain at some point in the future. Because this minor grand trine, or this minor trine, is occurring between three slow-moving planets, this is likely to be around for a while, which is why I think it's really important that you take a look at this astrological chart in the context of your own birth chart and see how it interacts with you and your external circumstances, okay? I know people are already sick of AI. I just want to say, and Spirit is also wanting to say, we ain't seen nothing yet when it comes to AI and how much of our job market it's going to replace. How many jobs, how many careers this is going to completely upstage even. With that Pluto, and especially with Aquarius and Uranus working together so smoothly, things are going to go faster than even an air sign might enjoy. Okay, just keep that in mind. Keep grounded, keep a meditation practice throughout all of this. When things get crazy, this is where a meditative practice is going to be of the most assistance. No matter what changes in your external world, you are at utter peace because you are grounded in your higher self, and your higher self has existed for many, many years, if not centuries, over lifetimes. And there's not much that can surprise your highest self. You personally, in this lifetime, absolutely, but your higher self, not so much, okay? Also, don't just tap into a meditative practice. This is the time to seriously take your spiritual path as seriously as possible, okay? This might be a great time to get into some divination methods that work best for you, such as tarot, such as Lenormand, such as oracle cards, or some other way of you communicating and tapping into the universe, your ancestors, your deities, that sort of thing, okay? So, I want to take a look at the general energies around Uranus and Gemini for the United States collective. You do not need to be a resident of the United States. You don't need to be like a legal citizen even of the United States in order for this reading to apply to you. You are welcome. If you are a refugee without papers, you are welcome in this particular reading, especially if you live in the United States. Even if you don't live in the United States, if you are in a country that is heavily affected by what the United States does, like Canada, like Australia, for instance, then this reading is for you, okay? Did I already say this? I'm working with the 7th Sphere Lenormand by Tina Gong at Labyrinthos. I haven't shuffled yet. I want to do a 9-card spread. We're just going to get a general feel for this, okay? There are going to be details that I'm not going to hit, and keep in mind, this is Pluto and Aquarius working well together with Uranus and Gemini. This is all about black swan events, things coming out of nowhere, supposedly, that in fact did start somewhere, but we didn't necessarily see it because that Pluto pushes things underground until they pop out for everybody to see, okay? And here we go shuffling. Ah! Hang on, I dropped cards. It must be Mercury retrograde. Spirit says no more than 3, 2 more shuffles, 1, 2, and no more. That's all. Spirit says that's perfect. Let's take from the bottom of the deck first for the general theme of this ship. This is going to be a long-term journey. Okay? Think of ship as something moving slowly throughout water. Pluto is a watery energy, just a heads up, but we're talking about Uranus and Gemini here, and about really needing to tap into our intuition during this time so that we can navigate this time period as best as possible, especially for the USA collective. There's a real risk that you could see more natural disasters. The United States is not good at taking care of its environment as a whole. In fact, I believe it left the Paris Climate Agreement or the Climate Accord, if I'm not mistaken, with 47 moving back into office. This is going to be a fatal error for a lot of people living in areas that are going to be easily hit by natural disasters, whether that's earthquakes, tornadoes, floods, hurricanes, it won't matter. This is going to hurt a lot of people. These are consequences coming back into play. This is Uranus and Gemini coming back in after 84 years. The Uranus return is checking to see where the United States how the United States has progressed, or if it has, and is here to right wrongs if need be. I'm going to have a picture up on the screen of what this particular spread looks like. I'm building the top row right now, and I have pulled the dog card from the top of the deck. The ship came from the bottom of the deck, okay? The underlying energy. That's about obedience. We're going to be forced to obey. Whatever flow this Uranus and Gemini transit takes us for the next 6 to 7 years, we will have no choice but to obey. And we're going to know it too. I do see compassion and a lack of compassion, quite possibly. The heart card lands on the House of the Clover, which is about risk, and about reward as well. It's about taking things lightheartedly that we shouldn't necessarily. With the dog, together with the heart, there is going to be a tend towards more patriotism, and that is something that I associate with Uranus and Gemini, okay? Especially with the American Civil War, the World War II, the American Revolutionary War. Those were incredibly patriotic times, especially in the context of the United States' birth chart, okay? So that shouldn't surprise everybody. But there's also kind of a sense of just obeying, because that's what the powers be say should happen. This is quite possibly the more negative consequences of America first, making America first again, great again. These are going to be the consequences, and this is on the conscious level. People are going to be aware of this, but whether or not they move consciously through this is up to them. And when I say conscious, there's going to be this group effort I'm feeling of just great deep patriotism, but it's going to be somewhat mindless. People aren't going to be thinking too much. Most people aren't going to be thinking too deeply into it. They're going to be thinking about protecting their nation, even though this isn't white people's nation by any means. And they're not going to be too careful about thinking more deeply underneath the surface why these consequences are happening to them, okay? Yes, I am building the conscious level, but it's not going to be like aware consciousness, okay? It's going to be kind of the mindless kind of conscious, okay? Not going to be thinking too deep. I've pulled from the top. This is the child card. It's naivete, kind of like what I was saying just a few seconds ago. This is going to be a mindless, emotionally immature kind of consciousness. People aren't going to be thinking too deeply about it, because if they do, there's the risk that they could go insane, lose their minds, lose their grip on reality, go crazy in the streets. And that's not to say that that won't still happen here. Okay, that's the top row, naivete. I noticed that the naivete card, being childlike about everything, lands in the future column. I've seen in past readings that when everything falls apart, that Americans, most by and large, will not learn the lesson because they're too dumb. They don't want to face the truth. We are the grand, shining city on a hill. We have manifest destiny. God has given us all of this. This is a lack of maturity and a surrender to dynamics that keep them emotionally immature, mentally immature, spiritually immature. Anima, the feminine aspects of American culture. Feminine disobedience could come into play. Civil disobedience could come, a rise of feminism quite possibly could come into play as a rebellion against the trad wife movement, which I think is interesting. It's, again, with that Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini, that's going to lend itself to extremes. So it's going to be like extreme feminists with extreme trad wives. And there's not going to be much middle ground, very few shades of gray in between those two. But there's something that the divine feminine, or at least the feminine, the American females at large, or the American feminine population at large, there's something about this journey that they're going to be heavily involved in and pushing quite possibly civil rights further to the forefront, or at least making it very, very clear that a lot of women and a lot of feminine people, feminine-oriented people, are not happy with how deeply oppressed they have become increasingly over just the past few years. I'm thinking specifically of Texas rolling back abortion rights for so many pregnant people, and it's causing people to die, dude. And I see a real rebellion that's going to take a while. Now I'm continuing to pull from the top, and I'm building the second row, which is the reality around the Uranus and Gemini transit in the United States. This is about selfishness. So once again, it's going to be that extreme of the feminists who fight for the rights of all feminine people, all birth-giving people, for instance. But there are going to be lots of other women, feminine people, who drag things down for their own selfish gain. Because when the men in their life win, by extension, they win as well. I'm thinking of like the billionaire class at this point. These are women who gladly go along with what the toxic patriarchy says is good for everybody because they win too. They just need to shut up, be quiet, and Spirit's saying something crass and spread their legs is what Spirit is indicating, okay? All they have to do is sleep their way to the top, sleep their way up to the most powerful man, and they feel like they're going to be okay. And this is going to be a journey of, I'm seeing like gender relations, not to quote King Cobra JFS by any means, but this is going to be a time of upheaval for masculine and feminine in the United States. I feel like it's going to negatively affect a whole lot of people in terms of how surprising and powerful the dynamic is. It'll feel like it'll come out of nowhere, but keep in mind with Pluto in Aquarius, that energy has been under the surface now for decades. If you want to say the past century plus since women got the right to vote in the United States, you can say that too. That would make perfect sense in this context. But this has been brewing under the surface for a very long time, for generations of American men and women. And it's going to surface in some blasting is what I'm getting. Blasting up to the surface in some possibly violent ways. There's the real risk that you could see a great increase in the violence against women. And with all that air energy, there's a real risk that we could see that violence against women recorded on phones and uploaded to the internet in some particular way, possibly on Twitter, okay? We've got whip. This is not good. This is not good. I'm building the third row, but there's the first column. This is the past. Women have been obedient to the chains that bind them, to the conflict that keeps them in their place. Now, this is the past column. It's been this way for generations, since the right to vote. Take a look at what the women who pushed forward the right to vote back in the 1900s. Take a look at the Seneca Falls Convention. It wasn't just women who signed that agreement. It was men, too, who believed strongly that women deserved the right to vote. And I should say that white women deserved the right to vote. I am grateful how things have changed since then, and also how I see how they have stayed the same in so many ways. But for many generations, women have been forced to obey the whip, obey the conflict, avoid conflict, get along to and go along to get along. Figuratively, suck a dick in order to have peace in their lives, have peace in their homes. But these people don't have peace on the inside. Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini is going to fuel that desire for freedom, fuel that desire for breaking chains and ending karmic cycles, ending generational trauma. This is going to hurt, but I see it being infinitely worth it if we can turn the energy into one that future generations don't have to suffer through. We have the key. This is the present moment, or this will be the energy of Uranus and Gemini once it really gets into the swing of things. Love and compassion for humanity, not just women, but humanity, everybody included, all gender identities included, is going to be what revolutionizes this space. And revolution is one of the key words alongside Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini. Remember that Uranus, or I should say Aquarius, is in its home domicile with Uranus. This is going to be, this journey precedes this generation, precedes the generations currently alive right now, and it will keep going after we've passed. The torch will be passed to future generations of people, regardless of their gender identity. It's going to be up to them whether they will carry the torch forward or whether they will snuff the torch out. Okay? I note that the key lands on the house of the coffin. You can't spell out Pluto in Aquarius even more clearly. Coffin, the underground, what's been developing underneath. Revolution, Aquarius. It's spelling it out quite literally here. That's nuts to me, dude. Mountain. Last card. This is in the future. This is going to be quite difficult because the emotional, spiritual, mental maturity holds people back. The United States collective will tend to be its own worst enemy when it comes to progress. They will tend to be selfish. If it doesn't affect me, I shouldn't care. Go fuck yourself. I got mine. That's where the future tends to be. It's possible that there could be a resurgence of feminist thought, feminist discussion, and protest, and work. And I wonder if it doesn't get stifled because the United States collective will, by and large, be scared of the progress that those feminist movements are pushing forward. And just because I'm saying feminist does not mean that all genders, not just feminine ones, will be included. They will be. It's always been that way, dude. Even if there just been a few, there are still those few who believe powerfully in humanitarian rights. Feminist rights are humanitarian rights, dude. The ship rises with everybody brings everybody up. I'm trying to make sense of this. When the water rises, all ships rise. And I wonder if that isn't going to tend to be stifled in the future. I wonder if the powers that be won't try to shove this down. There is so much going on with the United States. It's not just Pluto and Aquarius. It's not just Uranus and Gemini. There are all these historical dynamic currents that are moving things in certain ways. Things that we're feeling now started generations ago, before I was born, before my parents were born. And in many ways, we have no choice but to do what we can with the situations that we're given. But I wonder sincerely if these feminist movements aren't going to be so scary to the powers that be. They see how it threatens their ability to stay in power. I wonder if they're not going to stifle it with stupidity and selfishness. They're going to deliberately throw up obstacles to keep this from progressing because they see what could happen when the master-slave dynamic is dissolved. And when I talk about master-slave dynamic, I mean a few at the top benefit from the labors from the rest of society. Okay, I hope that makes sense. I'm talking about the billionaire class, the elite class that get to collect trillions of dollars while the working class gets closer and closer to being impoverished, destitute, and on the streets, no matter how hard they work. That's the dynamic that must be dissolved. And I wonder if there isn't something about this feminist movement that would further that push towards that dynamic being dissolved. And that's when the billionaire class will feel genuinely threatened. There's the possibility of death. We don't have the side in this particular spread. It's not here. But I wonder if there isn't going to be a tremendous amount of conflict that does kill certain people in these feminist movements. Okay? Looking at context cards, the conflict is going to be very difficult. Again, with all those astrological transits all piled up on top of each other, this would make sense. I'm wondering if we're genuinely not headed into a time period of civil war. I've already talked about this on this channel. In fact, I released a video for July 2025 that asked about whether we would have a new American Civil War. And I'm seeing, and Spirit is saying, yes, we will most likely have a new civil war. I keep getting the number 1 in 8. Earlier when I talked about the rate of suicides increasing greatly, I got the 1 in 8 again. I'm not sure what that means. Is that 1 in 8 feminine people? Is that 1 in 8 transgender folks? Is that non-binary folks? Are those men? Are those cisgender feminine or masculine people? I don't know what the 1 in 8 statistic is about, but there's going to be a lot of bloodshed. And in fact, on this card, the way it's drawn, you can see blood dripping down. The cost, the human cost, is going to be tremendous. And yet, there will be people who will gladly bring about conflict to their neighborhoods. Remember that, here, I'm going to hold them up for you, that this is the past. And remember that we talked about violence against women. There are people who are frothing at the mouth to hurt not just people, but hurt women. Think of the incel movement, for instance, and I can imagine how the heat is going to be turned up on that. And Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, and Saturn in Aries is going to turn up the pressure. Once again, just because it's a grand trine doesn't mean that trining, that smooth energy, can't be used for great evil, great destruction. Please pay attention to where that grand trine shows up in your astrological birth chart, please, okay? We already talked about dog and child, about how civil disobedience will be greatly frowned upon, even punished with that conflict card, okay? But it's going to be an encouragement, once again, towards mindlessness. Patriotism, but it's mindless patriotism. It doesn't go any deeper than skin deep, okay? Be cautious of this. Be aware of where those patriotic feelings come from, what they're fueled by. It's fine to be proud of at least some of the things that your country, the United States, has done, but patriotism versus nationalism is an important conversation to have. I used to teach this to my students. Nationalism is just cheering your country on no matter what evil it does. Patriotism, though, is pointing out the flaws in the country and doing what you can to rectify those flaws and make sure that we go forward in the future, not committing those sins again. It's fine to be patriotic, but be cautious of nationalistic, and you know what I should have said earlier? Instead of patriotic, I should have said nationalistic instead, okay? Child, mountain. Can a child scale a mountain? Not without help. And you know what? I'm like, let's pretend this is Everest. Or some other, oh God, what's the mountain that's on the North Face? What's that brand? Kilimanjaro? For instance. Think about some of the most difficult mountains in the world to climb. You're not going to bring a child up onto a mountain. You're stupid if you do so. But stupid is one of the things that I see heading into the future. That people are going to take these gains that feminists create for the next generation. I wonder if those aren't going to be squandered to specifically the United States. That doesn't mean that the winds of this particular feminist movement won't blow across to other countries, and you might see their feminist movements take all kinds of territory, move all kinds of ground that the United States could never imagine. Because the United States is founded on money, bloodshed, and power, and not on humanity, the benefit of humanity as a whole. It never was. It was built on the backs of slaves. It was built on the deaths of millions of indigenous Americans, dude. So I see emotional, spiritual, and mental maturity holding the United States back, but that doesn't mean that the rest of the world's feminist movements won't also, that doesn't mean that they'll be held back. I see them progressing, quite possibly. Think of the South Korean 4B movement. Okay, I think it's 4B. I can't remember if it's 4B or 3B. I'm sorry. Spirit says that's all, no more. Oh, I'm looking at the diagonals, excuse me. The diagonal heading into the future, you've got dog, ship, and mountain. Our lack of civil disobedience, our willingness to just go with the flow is what's going to create our own problems. We are going to be our own worst enemy. This is going to be difficult. And it's this childlike mindset. I'm looking at the past column, or the past diagonal. It's the childlike naivete that is what is going to bring the conflict. It's an absolute die-hard need to stay in a small thinking box. And if we start to think outside of that box, oh, you're doing something way, way too much for us. Go the fuck away. Go somewhere else where people will want you. Again, I'm not surprised to see the extremes in this particular context. This time period, these transits kind of lend itself to those extremes. But I don't feel like the United States is going to progress, at least for this Uranus and Gemini transit. We'll see what happens with Uranus in Cancer when 2032 comes to pass and Uranus moves into the sign of the home, sign of the family, and of nurturing. We'll see what happens in that context. I hope I'll be there to guide you during that time period as well. We'll see what Spirit has me do or not do. So I am going to take a picture of these cards and I'll be right back. I want to close out this reading with a reading from the Oracle cards, the Sufi Wisdom Oracle. I often find these cards to be gentle in its guidance, especially when it's needed for particularly rough times. I haven't shuffled yet. Let's get started. I shuffle until Spirit asks me to stop. Spirit says that's excellent, indicating to take from the top of the deck. Finding the path. You are the driver and the navigator. Pluto in Aquarius gives you that energy for the collective, gives you you personally that energy, and gives the collective the energy to make changes. This is a turning point in American history, specifically for Americans, okay? You may underestimate the effect that you have on the people around you. You may say, I'm one person. No way in hell can I change the world, but that's not up to you. You might start to do something and it has a chain reaction, and indeed, you do end up changing a part of the world, not the world, whole world. But you choosing to stay on your spiritual path may be exactly what it takes to make change for the better, for the whole collective, to shake the foundations of power for the wealthy billionaire elite, to bring power back to the little everyday working class person. I want to take a look at finding the path. Doing as others, this is the poem associated with this card. Doing as others told me, I was blind. Coming when others called me, I was lost. There's that dog card. Then I left everyone, including myself. That's ego deletion. Then I found everyone, including myself. That was a poem by Rumi. In the face of a challenging decision, you may feel paralyzed and not know what to do. It might be fear that keeps you from finding your way, or stress may block your ability to seek higher guidance. You may doubt your own ability and question the wisdom of your restless mind. Rumi comes with a message for you to guard against others trying to influence you. Once again, that's the dog card. By staying centered in your heart, you can align with your deeper essence. This can be a magical moment to take a step towards creating the life that is right for you. The heart seeks solutions through love and opens the mystery of divine perception. There's the heart card that we saw in the Lenormand spread. You learn to trust a wisdom that is already yours. If you turn to your rational mind, you will be relying on a resource of limited vision. Rely on your higher self. Rely on your inner guidance at this time. Find your inner guidance, find your higher self through meditation and listening to what it is that the universe, that spirit, that your guides, your deities want you to listen to, your ancestors as well. Dear one, your deeper instincts are often the right ones. You can rise above your doubts and uncertainty by learning to trust your heart. It is wise not to become too attached to the outcome. Make a choice and stand by it. Taking a risk is part of life and a part of the human condition. Accept the consequences and know you have the ability to face them. The important thing is not to betray your commitment to your own growth and sense of well-being. The mantra associated with this card is, I am honoring and affirming my life by making a serious commitment to be the best person I can be. I will trust my heart to guide me in making my decisions. So frequently I find that American culture really prefers mom mentality, prefers a kind of sheeple mentality, if I can be a bit crass, as opposed to individuals finding their own paths through their own inner guidance. I'm getting from Spirit, this little light of mine. Maybe listen to that song again. Hide it under a bushel. No, I'm going to let it shine. Okay? You need to move through that energy through these extremely difficult times, because I don't think that I don't know how many people are going to survive this. And I'm hoping that if there are indeed martyrs to this particular cause, and I'm wondering if already that we don't already have martyrs, star seeds, sun seeds, falling to ignorance, falling in front of conflict, violence, people who just want to pull out their gun and start shooting, start the purge. We already see that. But even in light of what's going on with that dynamic, don't give up. Keep letting your light shine. Okay? Okay, I'm going to end on this emotional note. Please take care of yourself. Please listen to your inner guidance and do what your deities, your ancestors, your guides ask you to do at all costs. You can do this, okay? Thank you for listening. Have a great day.